Well, welcome to this blustery day over the Caribbean Sea. Here we are in our ocean studio. This is the Wookiee. I don't know how much of him you can see with the camera, but nonetheless, we are ready to continue on in our Messiah series. And it's really impossible to be correct, to put things in perspective regarding the term Messiah without also including the false statements that were made about the inventor of Jesus Christ. That would be Paul, whose given name was Shaul. And we're going to consider now a prophecy regarding Shaul from God's perspective. And he conveyed this 666 years before Paul would write his first letter, that being to the Galatians, where the myth of Jesus was first conceived. 52 CE. He considers Paul the plague of death, the most deadly human who has ever lived, also the most deceitful. And because of the fact that his lies regarding the myth of Jesus Christ and Christianity are believed, a million to one over the truth regarding what Yahweh, who is God, actually said about Dowd, that Dowd is the Messiah, not the myth of Jesus, that Dowd is the Son of God, not the myth of Jesus, that Dowd is Elyon, the very influence of God on our planet, not Jesus, that Dowd is the chosen one, that Dowd is the one through whom the covenant was established, making him the one who fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, not anyone else. The entire New Testament is total trash, complete rubbish, because the one that matters is Dowd, and the one who robbed him to create the myth of Christ and therefore the Christian religion is Shaul Paul. So we must consider what was said prophetically about this maniacal, malcontent, and demonic individual. I would consider it the untold prophecy. If we move 4 centuries forward in time from the revelation of the Torah, we are greeted by a remarkable man. He was both a Shaphat judge and a Nabi prophet, the last actually of the Shaphat, and he was a contemporary of Dowd, and he served as the prophet and narrator of the Messiah's and King's highly luminous life. It is troubling, I think, from God's perspective and the perspective of his people, because they had collectively decided that they would rather be like the Goyim than be Torah observant. They'd prefer religion to relationship. So as we pursue these words, we find something remarkably telling about King Shaul, who was like the wannabe apostle Shaul, and that he disregarded the Torah's instructions, and he sought out to establish himself and his credibility by attacking Dowd. So Shaul, especially considering how the king's life foreshadows his infamous namesake, Shaul Paul, the wannabe apostle, we have a lot to learn from what God's communicated prophetically as a result of this. So because the people's king was demon-possessed and callous to the Torah, Yahweh rejected Shaul and chose Dowd to replace him. And this is also true of the wannabe apostle Paul, who was demon-possessed by his own admission and who rejected the Torah for his replacement of Dowd, named Jesus. 3,000 years ago, as they had so many times previously, The children of Israel chose poorly, electing Shaul to rule over them rather than being led by Yahweh through his Shaphat judges. As a loving father, rather than give up on them for having rejected him once the people's experiment with human governance failed and Shaul succumbed to an ignominious death, by the way, at the hands of the Philistines, God intervened to provide a valuable alternative. He would choose a shepherd to lead his people, giving us the opportunity to become part of his flock. Now, every aspect of this story is prophetic, drawing our attention to a far more evil man and horrid time, even a far worse individual. And this is how it reads. Then Shamuel, means he listens to God, said to Shaul, which means to question him, "You have behaved foolishly, failing to observe the instructive conditions of the relationship of Yahweh, your God, regarding the correct path to the benefits of the relationship that he instructed you. As a result, at this time, Yahweh has now established that your reign is over and that you shall never again witness as an eternal spokesperson on behalf of Israel." King Shaul was about 1/1 millionth as Torah adverse and 1/1 billionth as condemning of Yisrael, as was the apostle Shaul. And yet Yahweh called the first Shaul an ignorant and irrational idiot, when actually all he did was add a few of his own embellishments to the Torah. By contrast, Paul repudiated the entire Torah and he threw it away, nailing it to the mythical cross with extreme prejudice. And he replaced it all with his own verbal diarrhea. King Shaul's offenses compared to the apostle Paul were so insignificant, there would have been no reason to rebuke the man who was about to die or to tell us that he had been a bad example and was being enshrined forevermore as a witness to what we should avoid. But it is only in the context, I should say, of one Shaul being prophetic of the other and serving as a warning that Samuel's rebuke makes sense. He is condemning Paul, the New Testament, and Christianity with these words. Since Yahweh would not stand for King Shaul's interpretations or leadership, imagine what his response is going to be to the vitriol of the Apostle Paul, who began his first letter, Galatians, calling the Torah pornography. So now, your leadership position shall not stand. Yahweh has diligently searched for and responsibly sought an individual to approach him whose judgment and aspirations are similar to his own. Wow. As a result, Yahweh has instructed him regarding the correct and conspicuous leadership which will expound upon the truth among his people. Indeed, this is because you have not observed, neither closely examined nor carefully considered that which to show the way to the benefits of the relationship Yahweh instructed you. Shamuel, listen to him. Samuel 13 and 14. I've said many times that if we diligently seek to understand who Yahweh is, what he's offering, what he expects in return, who he chooses to work through, and how he achieves his purpose and plans. The more we study his testimony, the more we tend to reflect his nature. That's what is said here. Yahweh was choosing the man whose attitude, whose aptitudes, whose approach to life was similar to his own. And that's what happens to each of us. The more we study, the more we are placed in the center of God's will, the more we engage in doing what he wants done, the more we reflect who he is. His ways become our ways. His thoughts, our thoughts. His motivations are shared by those who love him. Dowd was a marvelous example. So man's way is through the shabuw'ahs, the king and the apostle who wrote and inspired the Christian New Testament. Man's way is through government and religion. It leads to death, to being controlled, to being fleeced, to being misled. Yahweh's path is through Dowd, and it leads to the covenant. And the reason for choosing Dowd is now clear. Yahweh diligently searched for and sought an individual whose judgment and aspirations were similar to his own. There was no better way to endear, well, there is no better way to endear ourselves to God and to be used effectively by him than to align our thinking and rationale with his. Yahweh's rejection of Shaul was a cathartic time for Israel. The people had chosen him, democracy and all, as their general, as their king, hoping that he would lead them in the manner of the Goyim. And they specifically said this to God. And when they did, Samuel went to Yahweh and said, I'm embarrassed. I've obviously failed you. I was supposed to work as the judge who would help them live in accordance with your Torah teaching. And they rejected me and want this man. They've elected Shaul to be their king in the manner of the Gentiles, and to also be their commander-in-chief. That's what the religious did. And God's response to Samuel was to say, no. They haven't rejected you. They rejected me. Powerful. When you think about it, this was a man who was speaking on behalf of Yahweh, which is a difficult job, an unpopular job. It has never been popular, and it has never been easy. And God took it on the chin and says, no, they're not rejecting you, Samuel. They're rejecting me, which is the same thing with the Christians today when I criticize their religion. The same thing with the Muslims when I criticize their religion, and with Judaism as I criticize that religion. Then Yahweh said, posing a question to Samuel, for how long are you going to grieve about Shaul, since I myself despise him and I've rejected him as king of Israel? No. I am gone from being quite political, and at one time in my life even religious, to being apolitical and anti-religious. And yet I will, because it is so essential to understanding the times that we're entering and what God wants us to reject, criticize the likes of Rahab, the MAGAs, and Donald Trump, but also the progressives and the Marxists, because they're wrong as well. And I will criticize all manner of Christians and Muslims. And God didn't have a problem with um, Samuel should he want to criticize the people's choice in Shaul or of their inclinations to be governed in the manner of the Goyim. His problem was with Samuel choosing to think that there was some way of redeeming Shaul, some way of fixing this problem. God doesn't want us to look at Christians and say, what can I do to help them? He doesn't want us to look at Muslims and say, can their problems be fixed? Can this rage that they have be resolved? Israel, he's not looking for you to do that. He's not looking for you to create a detente with the Muslims that surround you. He's not looking for you to find a way to fill the gap between the Israeli Marxists and the Israeli religious, the Haredim. No. God's rejected all of them. We ought not try to fix what God has rejected. And it's not that he has just rejected them. He said, why are you doing this since I myself despise him? I hate him. I loathe him. I have disavowed him. I have no more association with him because I abhor him. I refuse to accept him. We can't resolve the issues that divide Christians and Muslims and Haredim and Marxists and MAGAs and conspiratorialists such that they can have an association with God. That means that our outreach on Facebook and on X is completely meaningless. That is the audience in those places. We cannot reach them. We cannot change them, nor should we try. Well, that's powerful language right there. We cannot reach them, nor should we try. God is never going to have an association with those he has rejected because of their religiosity, their politics, their conspiracies, and the like. Let that resonate with you. That's why you notice in this last week or so, when I've realized that Facebook has become as bad as X and X is as bad as ever, that there's just no reason to post. Yes, I think that we will encourage one or two, three individuals to continue to keep the account current at X and at Facebook, but mostly by sharing what we know to be true with those with whom it will resonate. Because pointing out the idiocy of the political and the religious only has one benefit, and that isn't that we're going to change their mind, nor should we even try, but to forewarn those who are part of the family of how evil they are and how God wants nothing to do with them. But doesn't the family already know that? Do we need to keep reinforcing that politics is anti-Yahweh, that religion is anti-Yahweh, that conspiracy is anti-Yahweh, and that those who engage in these things, those who came from the conspiratorial cult of Larry Hendricks, who I think is now deceased, they never fit in. They were never going to fit in. They were never welcome. At the very best you could hope for is that those who were on the periphery of that and who disengaged quickly after we came to recognize that it was rotten. And, to some degree, I'm at fault because I had him as a co-host on one of my shows. He weaseled himself in, and I had to wiggle him out. But once we came to know that God said, no conspiracies. I don't want anything to do with the conspiratorial. Didn't say fix them, didn't say resolve them, didn't say educate them, didn't say debate them. He says, no, don't be that. Don't engage in that. And the moment we said that, there were many of you who accepted that and came out, and you're welcome in the covenant. You make wonderful contributions to the covenant. But we need to also understand that many of those who are in those kinds of cultish environments are there because of flaws, deep flaws in their own lives. And they are never able to appreciate the truth. They are like all conspiratorialists. They're not only looking to resolve a problem in their own lives and blame someone else for their miserable lives, which is the case with those who have gone from being part of our community to assailing us. But they also are like all conspiratorialists. They'll fixate on a dot and not understand that that dot that they're fixated on, that they think proves their case, is actually staring them in the face and saying, it's you. You're the problem. You're stupid. You're unable to think. And so we can't resolve those problems. You either hear the message and you say, oh boy, I ought not be doing that. That's really stupid. But that's not the nature of the conspiratorialists. They cling to their lies. They're devoted to them. They're defined by them. And the same thing is true with the religious and the overtly political. You don't find them ever letting go. And that's good. That's not bad. It's good. Why is it good? Because God doesn't want any part of them. If we were to lure somehow and cajole the religious, the conspiratorial, the overtly political into the covenant, God would be exceedingly disappointed in us. In fact, he'd say, you're not capable of listening to me. You didn't pay any attention to what I said. I can't work with you anymore. That's what would happen. Now, God does fortunately recognize that we're flawed and imperfect, and that's a good thing, that we're learning on the job. And so there are things that we will have done before we know better. And so long as when we do know better, we make these corrections, these course corrections, that's all good. Nobody starts with all the answers. We develop the answers as we learn. And God's only issue there is that as you learn, you make the adjustment and you do as I have asked. And we have. I'm going to share something because, as Rich knows, I don't keep secrets well. I shared something with Rich, 15 minutes before this program began.
Yep.
Just before I went into makeup, which in my case means recognizing that the wind is blowing out here, I tossed some water on my head and put on a new shirt. That's a makeup for these shows. I hope it shows. I did run my fingers through my hair a few times just to make sure that the water kept it reasonably in place as the wind blows. So I made the effort. And a nice shirt too, right? Being facetious here now. One of the most impactful prophecies in the entirety is only so much the book can do for one program. You're going to find a new, more comfortable place to nap. One of the most powerful, insightful, influential of all of the prophetic statements that Yahweh has made is found in the 31st chapter of Yirmiyah. Many of you know it. In fact, my guess is that when I say Yirmiyah 31, that everyone listening to this program knows what it says or has a general understanding of it as far as it goes. They know that Yahweh decided that he would renew and restore his one and only covenant with his people, specifically with Yisrael and Yehudim, not with Goyim, not with the church, not with Christians, with Yisrael and Yehudim. And that he wasn't replacing one, he was reestablishing and renewing that agreement. The next statement says that the restoration of that covenant is not going to be exactly like it was, not when he just discussed it with Abraham, or when he promised to enable it through Dode. No, he said it will be slightly different than the expression of the covenant when I forcibly drug the children of Israel out of Miqra'ey, the crucibles of human religious and political oppression, with a resolute and firm hand. And the reason he says it's going to be different than that is that there he realized they weren't smart enough to get out of their own religious shadow. They were belligerent and malcontent, and they thought they were smart and they knew nothing. And so God said the only option here to have the survival of my people is for me to drag them out of Israel with a shazak, with a firm hand. By the way, there's an interesting insight to all of that. And it pertains to what I've been sharing in the library studio, that when there is a difficult job that needs to be done, God very seldom acts without having infused his fixer into the milieu. Somebody that he knows is firm, that's unyielding, that's resolute. And we find that affirmed when Moshe does his meltdown with Mow'ed. But I'm actually convinced, and I hope to find the evidence for it. I've certainly witnessed it in my mind, and now so many things are being presented through the Ruach that I'm finding affirmation of, that it really is it's an exciting time. But I'm convinced that Mow'ed didn't just appear inspired by Yahweh at the point of Moshe's meltdown, but that he was part of that resolute, firm hand that was working alongside Moshe, who was fairly passive. Moshe did not want to be in that position at all. He let God know he did not want to be in that position. And every time the children of Israel challenged him, he did a faceplant and ran to Yahweh. He never once stood up and said, "No, you're wrong. Stop it." And so I think he had someone that was God's way of demonstrating that resolute and firm hand. And we'll talk about that later as it comes up. And I just want to dispose of one complete lie. Somebody was posting, somebody whose name I don't recognize, on one of the chat rooms as we were doing that show. It says, so, if you're being infused in moments and time, is that reincarnation? And no, good God, no. Reincarnation is a religious concept. It is about karma and the previous life of a person determining if they come back in the physical body of a worm or a snake or a person or a lower class or an upper class in the Hindu religion. No. If you don't understand what a soul is and how God can take a soul and place it into a body when he wants to accomplish something, and that the body is essentially nothing to God and nothing to that soul, and uses them for a specific period, for a specific purpose, and then removes them, then you have no clue what Enoch or Elia or Dode or Yada or the Amma represent, or how God uses them. You're a danger to yourself and to this community when you make statements like that. Stop it. All right. So God said the one difference is going to be that's the way they are. And then God explains how that difference will be manifest when the covenant is renewed, because he says, I'm going to write a copy of my Torah inside of you. Wow. That's quite different, because during the Exodus period, the Torah wasn't written inside of anybody. The Torah was an external document that the first book was dictated to Moshe, and after that, the Torah was experienced by Moshe and the children of Israel, and they wrote their experiences down, and then Moshe tried to encapsulate what he learned to create Dabarim. So very different on it being an external document that you can reject. You can do what Shaul did, which is to try to change it. What Paul did, which is try to annul it. What Jews do, which is to dress it up as a whore and plaster over it with their Talmud. You can do all those things, or you can, incorporate it into your life by studying it. But he says, I'm going to write a copy of it right inside of you. Pretty cool, right? So that is the difference. And that he says that as a result of that difference, my people are no longer going to bend and twist and pervert my message. And they're not going to go astray any longer. Boy, great. So this is happening as we make that transition through taruw'ah and Kippurim to Sukkah in 33 CE, year 6000. Yeah. And we end up in the garden with this marvelous opportunity to demonstrate that there are many who are capable of earning God's trust by being observant, responsive, and reliable. All great. So that's what this thing is, that whole testimony is presenting. And that's typically where we sign off and say, well, that was a great lesson. That's not where God signs off. And I'm not going to try to quote it by memory, because I have read it in the Hebrew. I have not translated the entire thing, nor looked at every mood, conjugation, and stem, every pronoun along the way. But let me tell you the gist of it. I was tracking down evidence that the reference to the greater and lesser luminary in the first chapter of the first book of the Torah, pursuant to the fourth day, that are signs, they are willing volunteers to fulfill the Mow'ed, the serve as restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony and the 7 annual meetings with God. That I wanted to know more about what God had to say about them. And of course, there's a marvelous statement that directs our attention to it in the 89th Mizmor, which we'll get to in the library studio as we continue our refresher course on that profoundly important message. But what follows in Uriah 31 is that God says that he established the Son, who he has identified as Dode, to provide illumination, light during the day. And that with the moon, represents Yada, he has very specific, written, etched in stone, inscribed prescriptions for living that he has communicated. And that if either of those two, God says, if either of those two choose not to fulfill their mission, are not willing to do as I have prescribed, then there will not be a single Israelite who survives. It's a devastating if then. If either of us, Dode or I, in any way renounce our calling, foreclose on this mission, and don't do as we have been asked, it's it for Israel. And if it's it for Israel, it's it for the planet, all life on it. So I'm going to run through that in a more detail over the rest of today. As I say, I've gone back to page 1 of chapter 1 of the Coming Home 4, based upon all we have learned. And I will pursue this, and maybe it'll be later today, maybe it'll be this time tomorrow. I'm going to go through that with you because, wow, as you read it in concert with the greater and lesser luminary and Bereshith Genesis 1, and up to that point, God's all in. There is a plan C and D, but there's no other alternative. The crag and the Dode either come through and work collaboratively together, not only with each other, but with Yahweh, or it's over. Profound, huh? So Yahweh is telling Shamuel, he listens to God, that I myself despise him. I have rejected him as king of Israel. He says, why are you continuing to worry about him? I have rejected him. I mean, that is, I think, as clear as words allow. I don't want you to try to resolve the misguided nature of the religious, of the overtly political, of the conspiratorial. Don't do that. I myself despise them. I have rejected them. I loathe them. I have disavowed any association with them. So, alternative. That's bad. What's good? So, fill your horn, Karen, the container of your ram's horn trumpet, which can emit brilliant flashes of light from the very summit of the mount, with olive oil, shemen, and walk, traveling on a journey. Oh, what did the little Twistians say caused their pretend Jesus to be the Messiah? He was anointed by taking a bath in the Jordan River, huh?
Just like
the Jordan River. Did the Jordan River flow with olive oil?
No.
No.
That's where the pagans bathed.
Oh, goodness. So fill your horn with olive oil and go. I am sending you to Yeshe. Name means to stand out and be an exemplar. He was anything but. He was a louse. The Beth Ha-Lekemi, the resident of Bethlehem. Yeah, it's Dode that came from Bethlehem. That was another act of identity theft to place the mythical Jesus there. They stole everything. I even stole, and I will share with you how they came about having disciples too. Even a mother and father of baby Jesus has, well, baby Jesus has got nothing in truth. And it wasn't Mary and Joseph. You know, as we go through these programs, I'll share with you how all that actually played out and materialized. A resident of Bethlehem, because I have seen a king to approach me among his sons. I have said, and this is part of what's happened here over particularly these last few months, where every day, sometimes multiple times a day, I'm now seeing what God wants me to perceive regarding how he coordinated everything pursuant to his people and plan, and then directed to the passages that affirm these realizations. And one of the things that I have conveyed is that God did not see a king in an 8-year-old boy. He could have seen an 8-year-old boy there as a shepherd, but not a king. Because if God projected what Dowd was going to become, he would have found that he wasn't a very good king. In fact, he was worse than Shaul. In fact, Dowd came to be the exemplar of Yisrael. He will be the greatest of all kings, but that took some doing. And so the only way for Yahweh to recognize what Dowd could become is to see him in a more extensive life. And indeed, he had seen his potential in Adam, the first man conceived in God's image with a nesama, with a conscience. And I think he got to know Dowd a second time in a full life as Noach's son, Shem. And so I think that this life as the shepherd boy was actually the third time that God became acquainted with this soul that he came to recognize had so much potential. So when Fritz confronted with the truth about the fraudulent nature of Shaul, who is the author of Christianity, we're saddened and disappointed for any of us who previously believed his lies, as I once did a very long time ago, while grieving for those who are beguiled by them, although recognizing that there's nothing we can do to help them. Our response progresses, of course, from all the way to anger, as God's did, as we confront the realization that God despises the religion Shaul Paul conceived because of the horrifying impact it has had on his people. Christianity demonizes them. Yeah. Reason I gave up on my attempt to return to X here this week is that, many of you know that there's a remark called the synagogue of Satan in Revelation. I've actually deduced that that it was written by Yahuchanan, who now I know who Yahuchanan is, but it was written by him to denounce Paul. Paul was the one who had gone after and demeaned everything associated with Yahuchanan. And so Yahuchanan's response was to talk about Paul, who admitted he was a rabbi and admitted that he was spending his Shabbat in the synagogues. And so he referred to the man who admitted 40 years before John's letter that he was demon possessed. And so he referred to the synagogue as Satan. It's Paul that he is denouncing. But Christians think that he is denouncing Jews, and that because they're called the synagogue of Satan, that the Jews must be demonic, not Paul, not them, and that they have open season to hunt and kill Jews. And so there were 2 posts on X proclaiming that nonsense, and I challenged them, said, no, you've misinterpreted the whole thing. That is not what the synagogue of Satan means. And God has committed to his people. Ongoing, it's not going to be the church that survives. It's going to be Yisrael. And X, with Gronk being the ever stupid one, not only said that my post was violation of their rules, that I was hateful to hate, I guess. That I was opposed to anti-Semitism. I can't have that on X. No, it's the home of anti-Semites. And so they gave me a chance to actually respond. I wrote an explanation that says, no, I'm not promoting the synagogue of Satan, nor am I promoting hate towards Jews. I'm trying to protect Jews from Christians who are misusing this statement. So X wrote me back and said, no, we stand by our verdict that you have violated our rules and what you wrote was hateful. Now, I've subsequently posted on X, it says, can you imagine AI being this immoral, this resolutely stupid? But it is. Maybe X is offended, and Gronk is offended, and Elon Musk is offended, because they are the synagogue of Satan. But nonetheless, that's the world that we live in, and God wants no part of it. So Samuel said, how can I go? If Shaul hears of it, then he will have me killed. Oh, come on. God. You know, there is evidently a reason that God picked Chinook and then has reestablished his presence along the timeline to keep his people and plans apace. Because even the best of them, I mean, Dode was a fine man, Moshe a fine man of character, and yet they just crumble. I mean, God says, I want you to expose and condemn Islam. I've written, 6 books? No, 7, 8 books condemning and proving that Islam is a fraud, that Allah wasn't a god, Muhammad was not a prophet, and that it's a terrorist manifesto that is based upon world genocide. That's what the Quran says. So not only did I do what he asked and publish these books, but I did over 5,000 of the 10,000 radio shows I did initially under my own name, telling the truth about Islam, for which I received thousands of death threats. I never once said, God, no, I'm not going to do that because I'm afraid the Muslims are going to kill me. No, that's not what you say. You say, all right, that's what you want me to do. You understand, obviously, that there's some danger, some risk along the way. So that, I would ask for your protection, but I guess I really don't need to, because if you're asking me to do it, I have your protection. So, all right, let's just get with it. Let's go. But that's not what he said. And it's disappointing that God didn't find people that were more resolute, more shazak, more gibor. Too many meek and mild along the way. Anyway, therefore, Yahweh said, because, he didn't have an alternative, did he? Take a bull, an eglah, a bull. I wrote cow here. I don't know why I wrote cow. Well, I probably wrote cow because I wasn't aware of the terms. But both bakar and eglah both convey the same thing. I want you to take a bull. Okay, well, that's the answer. You need some courage? Bring a bull. Need to stand up against the naysayers, the deadly and the destructive? Yeah, take a bull. And say, I have come to offer a sacrifice. Yeah, it's the bull. He's going to be sacrificed. Indeed. Oh, man. When I read these kinds of things, and the King of Cables has probably posted them, and you can probably read that I wrote cow and calf when it's a damn bull. Is that I could, if we had another 10 years, I could go back and rewrite every book, and I could infuse them with what we have learned over the last year. But the fact is, the books are really good. Does it make a big difference for that particular statement that it reads cow versus bull? No, because at that point we're not driving this point home. But if I were to do that now, it wouldn't just be let's correct some of the conclusions. No, it'd be a complete rewrite. All new translations, new insights. The books wouldn't be 25,000 pages; they would be 125,000 pages. And it would take, in this physical world with the limitations that we have with eyes and hands and bodies, it would take another. Well, I've got 26 years into it. With 25,000 pages, I'm a lot faster now, but still, it would probably take another to quadruple, quintuple what I've already done. It might take another 50, 60 years. Well, we're going to have that time, but not right at the moment.
Time.
Not at the moment. We're the last sands are dropping out of that hourglass and with great rapidity. I think it's why God said, I want you to go to the Yahweh blog. I want you to do this, because you can read what you've written, and it's pretty darn good, better than anything that's ever existed previously. Plenty good to bring someone to me, tell them what I'm looking for and what I don't want, and how to relate to me and what I'm here to offer. These are good. They do exactly what needs to be done in that regard, but take the next step. Take them along this journey with you in real time, based upon all that you're learning now, based upon this 25, 26 years of work together. You can look in the camera and you can update them in the moment. And that's a lot more powerful. And I still have the joy of spending 2/3 of my day translating and finding insights. It's just that now I'm writing for these programs. I've discovered something 15 minutes before showtime. I've already hinted at what I'm going to do. I'm going to finish that translation, and I'm going to go share it with you. So it'll be literally 24 hours perhaps at the most, and maybe less than that, from insight to sharing. So that is where we are on these differences. And the thing that we have learned for those that are, get themselves all tied up in their own little underwear, is that I hope it's the Muslim, the Mormon type, isn't it? That are
the magic underwear.
Yeah, the magic underwear. It makes them perfect, I'm sure, and modest and the like. That people are so hung up on this idea that if you speak for God, you're perfect. You're a prophet. You're perfect. No, look at everyone who spoke for God. There wasn't a single perfect person among them. Look at Shamuel. You don't get, much better than Shamuel, and he's screwing up here. No, they aren't perfect. And God doesn't even want them to be perfect. He wants them to be observant, listen to him, read what he has to say, ponder what it is, to respond to him, and then prove yourself dependable, trustworthy, reliable. And when you do that, what you're going to do is demonstrate that when you make a mistake, you're willing to say, hey, I wouldn't translate that cow anymore. I would translate it bull. And for the following reasons, that you're willing to learn from it and share what you have learned and grow as a result of it. And that when you fall and trip, which we all do, that you can so that you will always get back up and get going, tougher, wiser, better for the experience. That is what God's looking for. So resolving his people's mistake would actually be a joyous moment for you. One our Heavenly Father wanted to celebrate in his usual manner with a feast. Too bad I'm on the menu. But nevertheless, it is prophetic of the fact that when God finally resolves the religiosity and the timidness and all of the negativity that is associated with his people, in the end, for his return, so he can celebrate the homecoming with Dode, well, it's the bull that is going to be sacrificed. So God has a tendency to weave many truths into his statements. He says, and then invite Yishay, speaking of the religious who need to be cleansed, to the sacrificial feast. I will make known to you, yada, what to show the way to the benefits of the relationship you should act upon and engage in. So he's not, he went right there and says, okay, invite him to the feast. So he is invited, but that's it. He doesn't say, I want you to convince him. He doesn't say, I want you to placate him. He doesn't say, I want you to convert him. He doesn't say, I want you to debate him. He doesn't say, I want you to lie to him. He doesn't say any of that, does he? He just says, invite him to the feast. Now, this is what I want you to do. Right? Immediately. Forget about him. Okay, it makes you comfortable. Distract him with dinner. So invite him. Then he says, God just went to, then I will make known to you. Wa ane yada ata eth. I will make known to you what to show the way to receive the benefits of the relationship you should act upon and engage in. Okay? This did not say, I want you to placate. I want you to evangelize to. I want you to reach out to and try to help Yishay. No. Give him something to eat and you go about your business. And I'm going to make known to you how to achieve the benefits of the relationship and what you should act upon. First order of business. Then you will anoint Mashach, the basis of Messiah. You will anoint the Messiah on my behalf, for me. The one through whom I will reveal the way to get the most out of life. This is rich with Asher. Asher, Asher, Asher. Whom I will announce to you. I'm going to tell you the one. This is what you're going to do. And you're doing it for me because I am announcing that he is going to be the Messiah. And that's the way to receive the benefits of the relationship. And that's what you should engage in. All the way while that other idiot is distracted. Dode is the antidote to Shaul. He would be anointed, becoming the Messiah. More than any other person, Yahweh would make him known to us. He is the most prominent person in God's story. And it's a promise that he has kept. Together, Yahweh and Dode would reveal the way to the relationship God intended. In fact, even enable it. You read the 89th Mizmor. In the third statement, God gets right to it. The first statement he's made is that I established the covenant with Dode. So when we listen to Yah, we know how to act, where to go, what to do. We don't have to ask him, God, what is your will for my life? I have never asked him that question, nor should you. We are prepared to respond to opportunities and provocations. We are properly guided and instructed, prepared for whatever life brings our way. Good things happen when we follow this same formula. Listen to God and engage as he has requested. Yeah, perhaps that's why Shamuel's name means listen to him. As a bit of advice, you can do whatever you want. But when God says, I want you to go do something, my suggestion to you is that you don't say, but if I do that, he's going to kill me. Yeah, come on. Show some courage. Show some gabor. Man up. Okay? God will appreciate it. Shamuel engaged and did, therefore, what Yahweh said. I recall that's also what happened with Noah, wasn't it? That Noah listened to Yahweh and he did as Yahweh had asked. He came to Bethlehem, which is house of bread, but also house of conflict. Bethlehem. He started a bit afraid. And the elders of the town approached and they welcomed him. They kara'd him. They asked, "Did you come under favorable circumstances to reconcile? Shalom, as a friend with blessings to make us healthy and whole, in peace to satisfy and fulfill a promise?" Samuel listened to him. 1 Samuel 6:4. Interesting, right? So even before he got to Yishai, who evidently was some kind of a big shot, because he would have been aligned somehow with Shaul. The elders of the community said, "Yeah, why are you here, pal? Are you come in peace?" And I know what my response would have been. None of your damn business. I'm not here for you. I wasn't told to come to talk to you. Please step aside. Now, there are a couple of subtle insights here that we ought not miss. First, more than just the house of bread, Bethlehem would be a place of continuing conflict, as I have shared. The primary meaning of Lechem is actually war, conflict, to fight for one's existence. This reality deepens the connection with Dod, as he, more than anyone else, would have to battle to protect his people, even in this place. Second, the reference to Shalom is intriguing because it would soon be incorporated into the name of the city most closely associated with Dod, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the source from which teaching and guidance regarding reconciliation, Shalom, flow. It is a compound of Yara, which is the verbal root of Torah, which means source of teaching and guidance, direction, instruction, and Shalom, reconciliation for the restoration of the relationship. Now, third, based upon this statement, and one which will soon follow, the prophecy Christians celebrate, believing it predicts that their God, Jesus, would come as a baby from Bethlehem to be the king of Israel. Well, it actually speaks of Dod, the one man who would actually be the Melech of Israel, unlike the myth. It was always an awkward fit when applied to the misnomer Jesus, because even in the myths written about him, he was never the leader of his people, ever. And only Yehuda existed during this time, putting the Christian interpretation in conflict with key aspects of the prophecy. At the time that the myth of Jesus was supposed to exist, there was no Israel. He could not be the king of Israel. There was no Israel. There was only a province of Judah. Israel had been hauled into captivity 700 years earlier by the Assyrians. So as to not lose our place in the natural flow of this discussion, we'll eventually turn to Micah 5, and his prediction regarding Bethlehem after our conclusion of 1 Samuel 16. It is yet another example of how Yahweh's promise regarding his beloved son was all stolen and usurped by Christians to convert Jesus into their imaginary king. And that's, oh boy, so many posts on X and Facebook. Jesus is king. Oh my God. People are so easily duped. So let's continue to assess the anointing of Dod by the last of the judges, Samuel. His answer to the elders is interesting in that it shows that he made a transition from the sacrifice to the intended purpose. It is the most appropriate, beneficial, and godly thing we can do with our time and lives. And based upon this next statement, Samuel recognized that we need to be set apart from the common things of man. if we want to be reconciled with God. And lastly, the Shaphat decision maker realized that the means to reconciliation was through the Miqra'ey, the invitations to be called out and meet with God, which is why he extended the Kara invitation to Yeshai. He said, is answered, for reconciliation, shalom, I have come to offer a sacrificial feast to approach Yahweh. Become set apart and come with me to the sacrificial feast. He separated Yishai, setting him apart, as well as his sons, and he issued an invitation to them to the offering. Shamuel listened to him, 1 Samuel 6:15. Well, we passed the hour mark, and so I'm going to end this program here. We'll return to the same statement in our next episode here in the Ocean Studio of the Yahweh Blog, and we will pursue the anointing of Dode as the answer to both Shauls, the king in the line of the Gentiles and the wannabe apostle who would covet the Gentiles. More either later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.